If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
Today's chat's been brought to you by International Horse College. International Horse College's motto is people safety and horse welfare, and you'll find this message throughout our chats. Registered Training Organisation number 31352. This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Today's guest is Antionette Foster. Antionette's been here on before. She's our equine nutritional therapist, and today she's going to talk about 10 things most people don't know about pain and inflammation in horses. How are you, Antionette?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, fantastic. Antionette, we talked, I sort of threw you right in the deep end last time and said, right, what's your favourite quote, favourite tips? But this time we're going to talk about 10 things most people don't know about pain and inflammation in horses. Just tell us a little bit about why you came up with this topic, why you chose this. I mean, obviously there are things that most people don't know. Do you think it's something that people just aren't aware of because horses show pain and inflammation in different ways to, say, what we do, human to human?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is very often missed in horses, and if we make a comparison, between ourselves and our horses, I think that's a really good way to look at it. Mm-hmm. Often I think it's the most common question that I'll ask at a seminar or presentation, it will be of the audience, has anyone in the audience ever not suffered pain in their lives? And it's a foolproof question because you always get the same answer because, of course, no one puts their hands up. Clearly, pain is very common within the human health area, and I think we have to be very mindful of the fact that it's the same. In fact, it's actually worse in the horse industry. Yes.
Okay, and even just considering it takes them from being some sort of mechanical form of transport to actually a living, breathing animal, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think really, to be honest, the biggest problem is that it is often missed, and there's often great ways of being perhaps more, mindful of the possibility of pain. And I feel that's an aspect that people tend to just, not intentionally forget about, but they do forget about it.
Sure. So the first thing that you've got here is how often you consider your horse may be in pain. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, Absolutely. I think this is something that impacts on, of course, our lives and our horse's life on a daily basis, because when we look at the anatomy and physiology of the horse, it's not really designed for the purpose that we use them for. It has a long, rigid spine, a long neck, a very heavy head. I'm sure we've all held a horse's head. It's quite heavy.
Yes.
And it's not, the actual spine, of course, is not flexible like a dog or a cat, so they don't have that flexibility. And then we, of course, add the bridle, the saddle, and the rider. And, of course, we have to be aware that the rider can impact enormously on the horse as far as pain is concerned. I just know myself, for example, I'm very weak on the left side. I've just recently started Pilates. I keep pretty fit, but it's been pointed out to me very clearly that, Antionette, you don't have much strength in your left leg. And it is very obvious to me when I ride, for example, when I ride leg yield or half pass, from left to right, so right, that I often feel myself sitting on my left seat bone. And, of course, this is creating a problem. And this is, I'm just one of many riders, and I'm no Grand Prix rider. But, I'm of all the riders that are on their horses' backs, for example, if they are not sitting perfectly on their seat bones evenly, then there is a risk that they will be causing an interference with the horse, and in turn there'll be pain associated with that.
Yes. we've only got to sit crooked for a little while ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's very common. I think pain is very common. If we add all of those into the equation, we can pretty much surmise that there probably is going to be some kind of a minor, if not major, issue with the horse at some point in the horse's life.
Yep.
If not daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be.
Okay. The next point we've got is considering how many problems can be related to pain.
Well, I think that's a bit of a minefield. So a lot of horses that come to us with perhaps what they might consider is a behavioural issue, for example. Very often that's actually not the case. Very often it is actually pain-related. So if we take a scenario, we have, we go to the gym, for example. Anyone who goes to the gym, they may have a personal trainer. They might just go on their own. They'll go, say, however many days a week. And each time they go, they might challenge themselves a bit more. And we all know that by doing that, we are also challenging our muscles and our body overall. And we do end up with definitely some discomfort. So that's quite normal. So if we consider that the horse, with all of those additions, that's the saddle, the bridle and the rider, and then that even equates to what discipline, but even just riding around an arena, for example, we consider, say, it doesn't matter what age horse, but as the horses are being perhaps trained up through the ranks, if it's a dressage horse, for example, so from a young horse through to Grand Prix, we know that each day you are challenging the horse further. And there is no way that horse will not suffer some discomfort because the muscles become sore and tight just as they do when we go to the gym and we challenge ourselves. So that's a big one. So just working the horse is a major factor. So there's kind of a network of things that can occur. And I think very importantly, we need to look at the overall management of the horse, which is something that's very important to me and very dear to my heart, even though, a lot of what we do, of course, is nutrition. But nutrition is kind of the key to all sorts of things. And, if your horse is healthy and well-being is taken care of, immune function is supported, then, of course, even that, will support the muscles as well. So there might be a reduction in the severity of discomfort associated with a good nutrition plan as well. So,
yes.
Yep.
Yes, and, as you said, the overall management of the horse.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And that could be including perhaps body work, good body workers, an acupuncturist, whatever, someone that I always say, always find someone who is fully qualified, i.e. they really are qualified. So they have done the studies, that they know the anatomy and physiology, they know exactly their way around the horse, they know exactly how to treat the horse. And I think just like we have massages and osteopaths, etc., our horses definitely need to have the same, and I think that needs to be quite regular. It is dependent on the type of workload too, but I mean, if you have a pleasure horse, and a lot of our clients have got pleasure horses, and it doesn't matter what your horse is doing, so the severity or the possibility of pain related to work may be a little bit less. But in saying that, a lot of our pleasure horse riders, they'll ride their horse sometimes for 2 or 3 hours on the weekend and they'll have no work during the week. So you have to think that even that can impact on the discomfort level with the horse.
Yes. All right, now the third point we're going to talk about here is, are horses like humans when it comes to pain and pain thresholds? Do they react the same way? Do they feel it the same way? Just tell us a bit of comparison there.
Yeah, I think there's a very similar comparison. I guess the disadvantage is that horses can't speak and we can. So horses then have to deal with it in a very different way as far as how they react. With us, we can say, oh, hey, my back's really sore, my lower back's sore, my neck's sore. Where with a horse, it's almost a bit of a searching, I guess you've got to go on a search to find out what could be wrong. I just think that a horse will tell you, a horse has got the most amazing body language. And, for example, if you're working your horse one day and the horse works, and we all have this, the horse works really well one day and then the next day it just will not, go from walk to canter on the right rein for some reason. And, I think rather than saying, well, what is wrong with you? You know, yesterday you were fine. I think we have to sort of break it down and think, well, there has to be a reason why yesterday you were okay and today you're not.
Yes.
And I think that the horse has the ability to tell us in so many ways. Of course, each horse has a different way of communicating because they're all individuals. But I think at the end of the day, pain thresholds will vary like they do with humans, where some have low thresholds and some have really high thresholds. So their reaction will be comparative to that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Tell us about what types of natural pain management may be available. This is point number 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, in many cases, when we look at using, for example, non-steroidal medications, they can be very effective. But at the end of the day, and I'm also not saying too that they're not necessary, because sometimes you really do need an anti-inflammatory drug.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem, of course, with that inflammatory process is that, you know, pain, heat, redness, swelling, they're all symptoms of that inflammatory process. And we probably need to look at ways of supporting that inflammatory process as much as we can in a natural way, to allow the body to heal and allow the body to not have any interferences or blocking that natural healing process, which of course an anti-inflammatory drug can do. So it's the same old, you know, when we take an anti-inflammatory for a headache, for example, it is treating the symptom, not the complaint. It actually is blocking that natural healing process. So, you know, we like to think that there are other ways to support the horse as far as dietary supplements, herbal supplements are concerned. And there's lots of amazing studies out there now to suggest that there are many herbs, for example, and also dietary supplements that can support the horse as far as pain is concerned. We're not talking either about a serious injury or something like this. That's a different kind of area of pain, because that's an accident-based pain. But we're talking more about the day-to-day pain. And I believe that if we can manage that with the horse, in other words, incorporate that into your diet plan with your horse, and there's lots of products around that can do that. Some herbs, you know, we might be very aware of are things like curcuma longa or turmeric, which is one that's quite well known, but also very much misunderstood. So curcuma longa or turmeric, a lot of people believe that the culinary version of turmeric or curcuma longa can be quite effective with pain relief, but in actual fact it's really ineffective. It is a culinary herb for that purpose. So we need to look at different forms of curcuma longa, for example. So an extract form that is then very high in curcuminoids, which is the one that is directly related to pain relief and also has a really powerful antioxidant effect. So curcuminoids are the ones that we're looking for, or tetrahydrocurcuminoids, which is sort of a more isolated version. Whereas when we look at the culinary herb turmeric, it only has around about 4 to 5, not even that, probably say 2 to 5% curcuminoids, where an extract would have up to 95%. So that's a really good one. Again, Boswellia serrata is another one. I always recommend, you know, we only use extracts within our formulations. Extracts are very powerful. We obviously only use oral grade for human consumption. You know, you can eat all of our products for that reason, which is really good. Yep. So, you know, we can take them too. But there's lots and lots of different types of herbs, you know, like rutagraviolens, yanhusuo. There's a wealth of herbs that can be used as far as supporting pain relief and also being more as a preventative as well. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a combination of amino acids are great, you know, in conjunction with, you know, specific herbs, for example. I'm not one that has a great deal of faith in glucosamine because studies proved many, many years ago that it was really not very effective. That needed to be used in conjunction with chondroitin sulfate, and very often that is derived from fish. It's fish-based. Yes. So that's an area of concern definitely for me. So I think, you know, the bottom line is that we're sort of looking at ways to take care of our horse in a preventative way as well, so that we can reduce the risk of soreness in the horse primarily.
Yeah. And if we can do it in a preventative way, that's going to be best for the horse, you know. That's really what we're looking at is what's the best for the horse's welfare to give us the best
Absolutely.
results. Because if we can do something preventative, that's much better than the horse getting sore and then we have to treat it anyway. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is 100%, absolutely. And, we have a much happier, healthier horse and one that's quite happy to work.
Yeah. All right, the next thing we've got is pain can create situations that can escalate and make the problem worse. So what would you mean, is that behaviour-wise or is that, if you can tell us about that anyway.
Yeah, I think I've actually sort of probably doubled up on that a little bit. But look, absolutely 100%, there's no doubt that pain can create situations where the horse will become anxious and perhaps there's a behavioural issue there as well. So that can definitely be influenced by pain.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's sort of, the variation will depend on the horse itself, so whether or not it's going to react, for example. But, I mean, it can escalate to a point where the horse can become quite unruly and, may buck or whatever. It might get bucked off, which isn't a good scenario. So pain really can get to the stage where those problems become, worse and worse and worse. And
they can hurt themselves, can't they? They can throw themselves around
definitely.
so badly that they can injure themselves so badly. Mm.
But I think, again, it's also about us not understanding that this is a problem, and trying to perhaps ride through it or because we don't, it's not sort of in the front of our minds. We're not thinking that, this can't be from pain, but it definitely can be. I know in my practice that I see probably pain as being the number one issue that we treat.
Yep.
So I consider that if that's the case, and we look at humans, and it's really so common in the human health industry, and because, we do both humans and horses, and I mean, really, pain is so common. Osteoarthritis being sort of probably the number one up there as far as pain is concerned. And I might mention there too that, osteoarthritis is very common in horses, but it's also very manageable. We manage the symptoms of osteoarthritis because, like humans, they're much better to be kept working than not working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, now number 6, and we touched on it briefly before, horses are not designed for the job we've intended for them. Would you like to speak in a bit more depth now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we look how the horse has evolved, it's interesting. I just wrote an article a few days ago. Someone wanted me to write a specific article about the evolution of the horse and, how has that affected the way we feed our horses today, and, is there any difference between the anatomy and physiology? Of course, from the original, when you go right back, 50 plus million years ago, of course there's been a change, but progressively it's interesting to note that the teeth have evolved to, of course, be able to be in a position where they can, chew, grind, predominantly grasslands, pasture, etc. That's kind of been there from day one. So I think, again, we look at the horse and we look at, okay, he has got that anatomy and physiology that really is not suited to be a ridden animal. I think what we have to appreciate too is that the horse, in my opinion, has got probably the biggest heart of any animal. I think they're the most beautiful animals that exist, that walk the planet. I think sometimes they're misunderstood. But I think, again, it's their heart that carries them through. So whilst they're not really designed for the job that, we've intended them for, I believe that their heart is what tends to kind of keep them together in situations where things might become a bit unstable. So definitely when we look at that anatomy and physiology, they are definitely not designed to do the purpose that we ask them to do. And if you consider things like cross-country, like 3-star eventing, show jumping, even obviously racing, Grand Prix dressage, piaffe passage. Yes, we can argue that they naturally do piaffe passage in the paddock, but to actually put, as I said, a rider, a saddle, bridle, etc., and ask them physically, it becomes a lot more demanding, and physically they're not really designed. So I think we have to hand it to the horse because I think they're pretty remarkable in how they have that willingness to work with us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, another thing that you've touched on before was the bad behaviour, because you're saying bad behaviour is often pain-related. So speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, very often I think this, again, is probably the number one that is completely and utterly misunderstood. I think that, again, and it's not a reflection on the horse rider or owner either, because it's not something that you would expect to be in the front of your mind. Because when you go out to work your horse, you don't think, oh, what if he's in pain, before you get on. It's not something that you think about. If the horse is fit, healthy, again, it's not something that you may think about. But bad behaviour is very often created from pain. And it's also because, as I mentioned briefly before, if the horse is willing one day, working well one day, and not so willing the next day, then there's that tendency to push them even further beyond what they think they're doing, is just pushing them beyond that no, come on, you should be able to do this. If there's pain associated with that, then the reaction can be quite catastrophic. It can be quite mild. As I said before, there's those pain thresholds that come into play there. But it can be quite dramatic, and the horse may react in a way where it might take off. Again, we think about horses, they are creatures of flight, and they can be reactive. They're also creatures of habit. So again, this bad behaviour, if you don't get to the bottom of it, it will actually escalate and become more of a problem for the rider. Mm-hmm. So I think it's at that stage, if you hit a brick wall, you then have to break that down and think, well, why am I hitting a brick wall? Not literally, but I mean, why am I hitting a brick wall? What can I do here to break that down and find out what could be causing the problem in the first place?
Yeah. All right. It's easy to blame the horse, isn't it? It's easy to just say, oh, that horse is so badly behaved, but not considering everything and the reasons why. Yeah. And again, it's not a reflection on the rider. I think this is probably just a normal human reaction, is that, why are you doing this to me today? Yesterday you were great, the day before you were great, why are you doing this to me today? Like they schemed something they saw yesterday, they've schemed, and this is what they're going to get at you today.
Exactly. Yeah. They saw themselves in the mirror and thought, oh, okay, I should be doing something else here. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Number 8, we've got most nervous horses are not nervous at all. Much comes from tension associated with pain.
Yeah, I think this is a very common one, certainly because we do a lot of equine profiling, probably maybe up to 40 per week. And I've taught all my staff, and as you know, all my staff are qualified, and they all know that the first thing to do is to look at what the owner is feeding the horse, because once again, there is a direct relation between tension and nervousness and a high carbohydrate diet. So if the horses are being fed a diet that is too high in carbs, and it is potentially either genetically predisposed to being a nervous, tense horse, or it just is, then of course that can actually contribute to it. But when we look at it, we find that most nervous horses, or at least that are demonstrating nervousness or tenseness, have really come from pain. So pain can create that tension, so they will become tense. Again, it's very often these horses that are very, very sensitive and probably have, a low pain threshold, so that they're not really going to be able to deal with it very efficiently. And these are the ones that we find are the most, I guess, reactive to being tense and nervous. So they are sensitive, and I find sensitive horses are generally very kind horses too. So I find, just my own experience, with horses, I find that those sensitive ones are generally very kind and probably don't really want to do the wrong thing by you ever. But, when there is pain involved, then those sensitive ones can become extremely tense. So when you go out to compete, for example, we know, of course, I'm sure everyone's the same. When you go out to compete, you are nervous. It's like a performer going on stage, it's quite normal to be nervous. In fact, I think it's really normal to be nervous. And, of course, if your horse is tense from pain already, then that nervousness is going to obviously increase more and more, and it also is directly related to how you're feeling. So if your horse is feeling tense, you are going to be tense as well, and again, you might try and push through that. But I think that that pain is a real factor in tension in horses. That's one of those symptoms that, you know, we should be looking for, definitely.
Yeah. The next point you've got, and this is number 9, go back through them in a minute, is if a horse is broken incorrectly, then the forward aid should always work.
Well, I think this is a very good one because it's true if your horse has been broken in the right way, you know, I suppose sympathetically and correctly, that the horse really should be very happy that when you put your leg on, the horse should just go forward and happily work, you know, so it should work. So I find that if you put your leg on a horse and there's this sort of reaction where no, and the no is sort of, okay, something's creating a problem for me to allow me to go forward. Now, there are, as we'll talk next, there's lots of reasons and types of pain, and there's lots of reasons that cause pain. But I do believe that this is an indicator. So if you, again, have a horse that for a week is the forward button is there and it's active and your horse is reacting to it, and then the following week you don't have that, then I think, again, you need to think, well, there's got to be a reason for this. Again, you can't push your way through that. You have to ask the question, why is the horse suddenly not wanting to go forward?
Yeah. So it's the consistent going forward every time you ask the horse. And as you say, you talked before about communication and signals. The fact that you put your leg on and all of a sudden the horse puts his ears back and goes tense, you just think, wow, what's caused this? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting one because I think it's one that people maybe don't think very much about, but I think it's one that is very relevant to pain.
Yes, and it could be a memory of pain because they might have gone to go forward and got grabbed in the mouth or something, or
Yeah, I mean, this is a very real thing because they are creatures of habit, and unfortunately, statistically, it's been proven that horses tend to remember those cases where it's not a good memory, and that very often is associated with pain. So, and they do. I mean, each horse it varies with its capabilities as far as, how easy is a horse to train, how intelligent is the horse to work with, how much does the horse retain. But because they are creatures of habit and it's a behavioural pattern that could be developing, then I think, again, it needs to be addressed very quickly.
Yeah.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com.
All right, the last one we've got to talk about is the types of conditions that cause pain.
So this is a bit of a minefield, of course, because there's so many things that can cause pain. You just mentioned one then is just talking about, if you jab the horse in the mouth, for example, a mouth pain is quite common. And I've just learnt very recently because I work a lot with an amazing equine dental technician, Sally Ann Robinson, and she's very highly qualified from the UK. And I just had her out recently to do a bitting with my own horse to discover that what I thought was a 5.5-inch mouth, in fact, is not. My horse has a much smaller mouth. I consider I'm very knowledgeable, but obviously when it comes to, bitting and dentistry, I'm not a horse dentist, but she is. So discovering this was interesting, and it is a subject that I think needs to be talked about because we are very aware that in many cases that bits are ill-fitting and they might be too big or too small for the mouth. Now, if that's the case, then you automatically have a problem with pain. So an ill-fitting bit is one, and that can also be that perhaps the bridle is too tight as well, and with the bit in the mouth, that's one. A very, very common one is obviously pain from an ill-fitting saddle, and this is extremely common. Now, we know we've got some really good saddle fitters around these days. They're really great. They do a fantastic job. We work with a few of them. But again, this is a really big one because if the saddle is not fitting correctly, then this can cause a lot of discomfort through the horse's back. And again, if a rider is sitting crookedly due to the saddle not fitting correctly, so let's just say the saddle sits a little bit to the left or right, then we're obviously applying more pressure in the wrong spots. And the other one that ties in with saddles and saddle fitting is the location of the saddle. So very often I see this all the time, is that saddles are not sitting behind the scapular bone, they're sitting just on the edge or actually even further forward. Mm-hmm. And not only does this restrict the horse's movement, but it can cause discomfort over a period of time as well. And the saddle itself, is never going to ride in the right way for the rider themselves if the saddle is sitting in the wrong location. So that's one. Two, so the other very common complaint is definitely muscle soreness. This is probably the most common of all, and this is connected with, of course, horses that are working consistently and going through different training programs, using different muscles, of course, creating discomfort, which we did touch on briefly, but it is a very, very big one. It's a very, very common problem. Certainly for us, we do a lot of preventative treatments for horses because we come down to the simple fact that anatomy and physiology and the way that we ride our horses, the way we work our horses, that we want to make sure that they're comfortable all the time. So we do everything we can do to make that, scenario a really good one, so that when you finish riding your horse, working with your horse, that the horse comes out with a happy face, and so do you. So muscle soreness is extremely common, very, very common, and that can be hamstrings, it can be glutes, it can be muscles through the back, through the neck, through the pole. So, there's so many muscles that it can affect. And again, very similar to what will happen to a human who is perhaps doing a different type of exercise regime from one day to the next. So the same kind of relation there. The most common, which I touched on, is probably osteoarthritic conditions, so bone conditions in horses. This can vary from, quite severe lameness to probably maybe, for me, I would definitely pick it up if the horse was even short stepping a centimetre behind or in front. I would see it because we've worked with it for so many years. So, osteoarthritis can cause that discomfort and soreness and lameness, and then, of course, you have this kind of, escalation of function of the animal overall. Mm-hmm. So managing that is really important because it is very common, and managing it, just maintaining the discomfort is the key to that. So once again, if you have the horse comfortable and happy and is not suffering from pain, then the horse will very, very likely work very well for you. Okay. So osteoarthritis is very common. Things like, abscess, so perhaps stone bruises. Again, these can be quite painful for a horse. So, they need to be looked after and managed very quickly because they can sort of become an issue. With an abscess, you really can treat that, with herbs and dietary supplements without actually even getting the farrier out. And I always think if you can avoid getting the farrier out, because the sole of the hoof is very prone to infection. Yes. So it would be much better if that abscess actually does burst through the coronet band in preference. That's probably a good thing. And I think primarily they'd be the most important ones that would cause pain. There's obviously lots of other types of ailments and, injuries, of course, is one that we did touch on. Injuries can be quite catastrophic. They can be, tendon ligament damage through to fractures. So that's a very different scenario. Of course, at that point, you definitely need to have veterinary advice, but the ongoing management you can certainly do with herbs and dietary supplements as well.
I think, Antionette, let's just go briefly through them just as a bit of a revision, the 10 points. And if I just read them out, you could probably just give a quick summary. So how often you consider your horse may be in pain?
Yeah, so I think we have to think that this is probably going to be, there's a possibility, shall I say, that it could be on a daily basis, but I think it's more likely to be at least minimally on a weekly basis, and this is, again, dependent on the work level.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, the next one we talked about was how many problems can be related to pain. I think you said it was a minefield or, Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think so because as we just touched on, the types of conditions or some of them that can cause pain, but I think definitely there's a lot of problems that can be related to pain, and I think that we just need to be a little bit more observant when we're bringing our horses up from the paddock, or even I like to recommend observing. I think I mentioned this last time, just observing the horses in the paddock, occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, just to see that everything is just the same, that there's nothing different going on, because you might be able to determine if there is an issue and it is pain-related.
Yeah.
So, lots of problems can be related to pain.
All right. Now, we talked about humans when it comes to pain and pain threshold, and you explained that they can't speak, so they might have to deal a different way.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they demonstrate their pain in the only way that they can, and that can be a behaviour, or it can be, maybe turning around and trying to bite you when you're cursing them up, for example. That's another one. It can be anything like that, and again, that can come back to, an ill-fitting saddle. So I think that I like to suggest to people that we do try and relate ourselves to our horses and think, how do we feel, and then how do they feel?
Yes. All right. Now, the next one was the types of natural pain management available. And you did mention there, too, just to bring that up again, just something like the culinary turmeric, which I know a lot of people feed, is between 2 and 5%, whereas if you get the extract, it's 95%.
Yeah, curcuminoids, yeah. I mean, I think that extracts, if you're using extracts, I would also mention too that I'm not a fan, being a nutritional therapist and medical herbalist, I'm not a fan of single-use herbs because I like that synergy and I like to increase the bioavailability of the ingredients being used to get a higher result. So I prefer to use a combination to achieve a maximum result.
Okay, that's good. All right, now you said that pain can create situations that escalate and may make the problem worse.
Yeah, definitely. So we know that if we ignore it, it's going to get worse. And again, if we relate ourselves to our horse, if we ignore pain, what happens? It doesn't usually go away. If it's muscle or bone related, it doesn't go away. So we know ourselves, we need to go. I know personally that I have lower back problems, and I have a saddle that fits my horse perfectly and all the rest of it, and it sits in the right position, but I have lower back problems. It's a long-term injury, and I go to an osteopath and I have massage. So I think we have to, again, think, well, what would happen if we ignored it? Would it go away or would it get worse?
Yeah. All right, so you talked about you did talk about the evolution of the horse, but it's because horses are not designed for the job we've intended to.
No, I think, again, we have to just look at the anatomy and physiology, that we have got this animal. It's a big animal. It's got a very long, rigid spine, and it's got a long neck and a very heavy head. And once again, we are trying to ask a horse that probably is not really designed for, show jumping, dressage, whatever it might be, anything really. And, yeah, that's of course is a problem because they're not really designed for it.
Yeah.
And so therefore we have to be very mindful of that too and work around that factor as well.
Okay. And the next point you made was that bad behaviour is often pain related.
Yeah, and I think this is quite significant, and it's probably very common that we see this. And I know, just talking to a lot of clients with their horses, that if they have some behaviour that's just come into their training, that maybe they're pig rooting or whatever it might be, and they've never done it before, again, I would always say, have you ever considered that pain could be causing this?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Next one, most nervous horses are not nervous at all. Much comes from tension associated with pain.
Yeah, again, I think too, it's probably not to sort of sound repetitive, but I think, again, we would consider ourselves next to our horses in this case too, so that I know myself that if I am really bad, my pain's really bad, for example, I forget to take my own product, for example, which is very common. Plumbers have leaky taps, nutritionists forget to take their own products, but same thing. But, I know that I get really tense from pain. And I think, again, you'd be a bit of a champion if you didn't become tense from pain.
Yep.
Again, it's not something that can be ignored. So I think that nervous tension is very significant when it comes to horses and pain.
Okay. The next point you made was if a horse has been broken incorrectly, then the forward aid should always work.
Yes, I think this is a very important one too. Again, if a horse has been broken in by someone who does a wonderful job, then that forward button, that should always work. I think if it's not working one day and it was working a few days ago, then I think you have to question, well, why? And could that be associated with pain as well? And I think it is something that maybe people don't consider very often.
It's that question why, isn't it? If you're always questioning why did the horse do that and why, it makes us all more aware of what's actually going on and more able to even recognise the pain.
I totally agree with you. I think that question why is very important, and I think we need to ask that more.
Yeah.
Well, with anything, I think never just accept it. Just always question it, because, you'll get to the bottom of it if you do that.
Yeah. All right, and the last one we've got is the types of conditions that can cause the pain.
Yeah, so I think, again, we talked about muscle soreness probably being, I think, the most obvious one and one that does cause the most issues in horses as far as pain's concerned, because if it stands to reason, again, if we do that comparison between going to the gym one day and then doing something different the next, then, we know that our muscles are going to be sore the following day. So I think muscle soreness is probably the number one key as far as that connection to pain. But then, of course, there's obviously a lot of other conditions that are associated with pain too.
Yeah. All right, Antionette, that is great. That was the 10 things most people don't know about pain and inflammation in horses, and I think the information you've provided is obviously coming from someone with a lot of depth of knowledge in that particular area, not just about the pain, but how it can be fixed and how it can be prevented as well, the pain inflammation.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you again for coming and talking to us.
You're very welcome.
Those people who've just come into this, they should probably go back and listen to 180 as well, which is another interview with Antionette. She's an equine nutritional therapist. So thanks very much for your time today, Antionette, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.